Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 53 of the English with Kirsty podcast. And today I'm going to talk about a topic that I've already discussed in the Facebook group, but it's something that people seem to have a problem with more generally, and I thought it might be good to speak about this for podcast listeners as well, because I know people have told me that this is something they struggle with, and that is understanding English-speaking customers and colleagues. Because often people will say, oh, I chose to write an email instead because they wanted to avoid a spoken conversation. And I've done it too, loads of times. But there are times when you need to speak to people and understand people. I think when I did it, it was so I could avoid speaking. But for many people as well, it's so that they can avoid having to listen to spoken English and work out what the other person wants to say. So there are a number of problems that people have, and obviously the solutions are going to be different. So I'm going to look at a couple of the problems today and things that you can do to make it easier. So to start with, sometimes people have a problem with listening because they generally don't listen to very much English, and that's not part of their daily routine or daily life. So when they have to listen to English in a meeting or with customers or colleagues, then it's difficult because it's not something that they do regularly. So obviously there the answer is to try and do it more regularly and at times when it's not important. So don't get your practice in when it's an important meeting that could affect your career. Try to find some time when you're at home, and listening is a good thing because you can do it while you're doing other things. I listen to podcasts while I'm running or doing the housework or cooking, or you don't have to be looking at something. And to be honest, it's good if you're not looking at something, because often people say, oh, I listen to English by watching films and series, and that's great. It can help you and it's an enjoyable thing to do. But if you're relying too much on watching what's going on or reading the subtitles, then it's not really so much of a listening exercise anymore because you're reading and watching. And particularly if you're going to be speaking to people on the telephone, it's a good idea to do at least some listening exercises that are just listening. So that's all you're doing, and then you can do that anyway. You can be doing other things at the same time. So try and find something that's interesting for you, whether it's a podcast or some YouTube videos or an audio book or anything. It can either be for English learners, or it can just be something that you find interesting or something that's relevant to your work perhaps. And try to make a habit of listening to a bit of English every day, because then it will train your ears to listen to spoken English. And also if you have a conversation partner, that's good as well, because you don't know what they're going to say and you have to practice responding quickly, or at least spontaneously, to what the other person said. Another problem that people have is types of English. So for example, people who are working in call centres are called by people from all over the UK perhaps, or other parts of the English speaking world, or other people who don't have English as their first language. And they may find it really easy to understand somebody who doesn't have an accent, but as soon as other regional dialects come in, then they find that more difficult. And for them, I would advise that they look on the internet for, if they know the kind of places that people are calling from, try and find material in that accent, because then you can train your ears to understand that accent and to think about the differences between that and the other types of English that they've heard. So for example, when I went to Germany, I went to a place where they had a really strong regional accent, and at the beginning I didn't understand very much. By the end of the week, I could understand a lot more because I'd got used to that accent and how some of the sounds were different. So here it's not so much the words that are important. Even if you find a local radio station, that can be really good because you're just hearing people talking naturally and using this accent. So try and think about where the people are coming from that you're working with, where they what kind of English it is, whether it's a regional accent or where they live. And if you don't know that, or if it's somewhere like London where there are lots of regional accents, then just try to get practice listening to lots of different people. So really try to vary the people. Don't just listen to the same person with the same accent. So also you can ask them to, if you really don't know what they said, however much practice you've got, then it's still okay to just summarize what the other person said if you are speaking to someone, like, so you want to know, and then summarize what you thought they said, or I didn't quite catch that, can you tell me again? Just things to ask them to repeat it. And if somebody has to repeat themselves, they probably won't be bothered to give you the whole lot of information again. They will probably condense it down for you to the key points. So asking people to repeat themselves often makes them think as well, and think, yeah, what exactly do I want to communicate? And then it will be easier. Hopefully they'll just pull out the main points for you. Another problem is to do with that. It's native speakers not being clear, particularly if it's not a planned conversation. If somebody's doing a presentation, they've probably thought about what they want to say. But if people are just discussing something, then maybe they have no idea what they're going to say. It's spontaneous, it's not planned. And unfortunately, some people talk as they're thinking and think as they're talking, and they say far more than is really necessary. And that makes it difficult to pull out the key points. So one of the things you can do there is, you can ask them to summarize as well, but a good exercise to do away from the work situation is to listen to something and then summarize it, either in your native language or in English, but to practice summarizing and pulling out the key points of something. Because if you're listening to something like the weather forecast, then you are looking for specific information. Is it going to rain later? How hot is it going to be? But if you're listening to somebody talking about their opinion about something, there will be a lot more words, and it's a really good skill to have if you can pull out the key information and ignore the rest. Because often when people are talking, they say things that are not necessary. You don't need to understand everything, you just need to be able to pull out the key information. So if you get some practice at doing that before you get into real situations, that can be really helpful. And also, just because someone talks a lot, it doesn't mean that they've just given you a load of information. It could just mean that they weren't very good at sorting out their thoughts and putting it in a way that's clear and understandable. So don't always think that if somebody's been talking for 5 minutes, that's 5 minutes worth of information that you have to process. It could just be one point made 5 different ways, and it's really important to be able to recognize that and just to pull out the key information. And also, if somebody's been talking at length about a problem, if you ask them, so what do you think we should do about, it's looking for a solution rather than all the background information, which may or may not be helpful. What you really need perhaps is the solution, so their thoughts about how you should move forward. And sometimes I've done that with students, or I've done it as a learner as well, just so take some information and then summarize it, either in writing, verbally, however you do it. Just get into the habit of trying to do that. Another problem that people have is that there's too much technical vocabulary, so they can understand general conversation in English, that's no problem for them. But maybe they've moved into a new area of work and there is a lot more technical vocabulary. So here it's not so much a listening exercise, it's that they genuinely don't know these new words, and that means that a lot of the content is hard for them to understand because they just don't know these words. And here you can fix that by either reading or listening, because the problem is the vocabulary that's missing. So if you can find articles on this topic that will include the vocabulary, so branch-specific articles or websites or magazines or anything that will have this vocabulary in it, or maybe make yourself some lists of new words or words that are difficult for you and learn those words. It's more of a vocabulary exercise than a listening exercise, and once you have those words in your mind and you know what they mean, then it will be easy for you to understand them when people are using them in conversation. Also, there's people use a lot of horrible business jargon, which is unnecessary sometimes, and you may or may not be able to influence that. But if people do that around you, I wouldn't suggest that you copy them, but at least maybe find out what they're talking about, make a list of some of the phrases that keep coming up. And sometimes there will be things, if you're in a new company, that are just, it's not about your English, it's just that you're new. So when I started a job, there was a whole document with all the abbreviations and special terms that new people wouldn't understand, and I had to try and learn them, because that's nothing to do with English. It's to do with your company or that specific area of work. So it may just be that there are people who are using some terms with which you're not familiar because you're new. And sometimes English people don't understand things. I can't remember what it was, but there was a term that one of my customers kept using, and I had no idea what they were talking about. And in the end, I had to ask them, and they said, "Oh, everyone uses that when we're speaking English," and explain what it meant. And it did make sense, but it's not a word that, I can't remember what it was now, but it's not a word that I, as a native speaker, had ever seen before. It had just been kind of translated and made up, and everybody there knew what it meant, but I didn't. So don't assume that just because you don't understand something, everyone else does, because it may be that they won't. And sometimes people do just give you too much information to take in. And if you really can't understand someone, then maybe writing is the only way to go to be sure that you get the information that you need. Maybe not all the time, but it's something to be avoided when you should be having actual conversations with people. But sometimes it is just easier, if you need to be really sure about something, get it in writing. Or if you can take somebody else with you to the meeting, or at least at the beginning, then all the pressure isn't on you to do all the understanding. If you've got somebody with you who can help you, and you can do it together, then sometimes that is a way to solve the problem, at least at the beginning, until you feel more confident understanding that person's speech and how they put things in English. So I hope those tips were helpful. I hope there's something that you can take away from there, either something you can do when you're having English conversations, or some way in which you can prepare for them. This material came from my book, so this is chapter 35, in which I discuss this problem in the book. So if you're interested in other problems and solutions and tips, then have a look at the book. If you go to englishwithkirsty.com/book, then there's more information there, and also all the places where you can buy it, because there are people from different countries here, so I don't want to just give one link. There's also the different sites like Amazon or iTunes, that kind of thing. So englishwithkirsty.com/book has the full list. And also I just wanted to mention the club, which is starting in September. There's a Business English Club. It's new, and it's going to be an online club for people who want to improve their business English. So if you want to find out more about that, there's a monthly membership, and there's training, there's conversation sessions, there's a Facebook group, and there's a monthly task in which I'll give you feedback on either a writing or a speaking task. So if you want to find out more about that, you can go to englishwithkirsty.com/club, CLUB. And if you use, as a podcast listener, if you use the code giraffe92, GIRAFFE 92, then you will get £5 off your first month's membership. So I will also link those two pages from the show notes page, which is englishwithkirsty.com/podcast/episode 53. But you can also get there directly by going to englishwithkirsty.com/book or englishwithkirsty.com/club if you're interested in those. So otherwise, have a good week and have fun learning English. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.